Shalom, shalom, everybody. Ariel Bar Tzadok here from the KosherTorah School, found online at www.KosherTorah.com. In this class, this is going to be lesson 2 in our Woman of Valor series. I've always wanted to talk about this subject and deal with it in the appropriate detail and depth that it deserves. I wrote about it. Oh gosh, when did I write this? Oh boy, 20 years ago, more, I think. It's what we're going to discuss tonight in this lesson 2 is going to be the role models of the biblical matriarchs. But again, I said I wrote about this 20 years ago. It's in my book, eBook at present, Sefirot Within Us. Because whenever we're going to talk about male and female issues, as everybody, of course, knows today, we're in the middle of pretty much, I don't know if it's global, but clearly in Western civilization, a war between the sexes. And it reverberates in so many different ways. You see all of the tremendous unrest in the world, in society, and the human psyche. The whole, pretty much everything that's going on in conflict today is based upon this. Now, we touched on some of these issues in the previous class, lesson 1, where it was explaining the Kabbalistic archetype of the female. And obviously, before we can ever really understand the Torah's position of women, we've got to understand the underlying concept and construct of femininity. Now, let's be honest here. The Kabbalistic descriptions that I will describe here are going to come from the 16th century writings of Rabbi Chaim Vital, the Torah, the Kitvei HaAri'zal. And let's be fair. Do you really think that the ancients 4,000 years ago thought in the ways and the means of later metaphysical Judaism? The answer is, of course, obviously not. But, big but there, understand that what Chaim Vital in, quote, metaphysical Judaism is describing is actually the psyche of collective humanity. That's the one thing I love about the Kitvei HaAri'zal. Now, remember here, in our KosherTorah school, I teach what's called the Torah of the Kabbalah Nevu'i, the prophetic Kabbalah. Our emphasis is, let's be blunt, to fulfill a single commandment of the Torah. You have all my peers out there that are teaching you all of the basics of Torah Judaism, about kashrut and Shabbat, Taharat Mishpacha, and all those things are, of course, Kodesh Kodeshim, the most important things in the world. Me, I'm only here to teach you one commandment. And if you can fulfill this one commandment, the rest will just follow along. And that commandment is the single mitzvah called devikut, bonding with God. Atem hadevakim b'Hashem ha'im kulchem hayom. Okay, that's it. Just bonding with God brings life. And everything that I am here to teach is about practical applications of meditation. Ellie, where's that essay that I just gave you earlier? Do you have it? Can you bring it over here real quick? I'm going to show you something real quick, something I just finished today. All right? The Rabbanit, she always gets a first peek at everything that I do. There's a reason for that, too. But aside from that. And I want to show you the kind of stuff that we got going. Thanks, dear. Now, I'm going to be teaching a course on this publicly. It'll be available here at Facebook, YouTube, Patreon. But for my regular students who are supporting students of the school, I go into deeper, details that I can't do in public. Here it is. This is the practices of how to use the first 24 triads of the 72 names of God. You got so much stuff on the internet today that is just, unfortunately, it's not only not authentic, unfortunately, it's misguiding. And that is why I feel the necessities I've described in those classes, why I have to speak up. You know something? If you have somebody out there as claiming to be a nutritionist, and they say, I have this great healthy diet for you that's going to help you lose weight and get healthy, etc., right? It's called the Snickers diet. All you have to do is eat 3 Snicker bars a day, and wow, watch what happens. Well, I was another nutritionist. I might have something to say about the, in quote, Snickers diet, because I would not only consider it wrong, I would consider it very dangerous. And there is, unfortunately, today, such an attack on Torah, such an attack on Judaism, that, you know, like it says in Psalm 119, all right, Et lasot l'Hashem, it's a time to act for Hashem. You know, I'm going to digress for just a minute, because when we're going to talk about women's issues, it falls into this greater attack on anything kadosh, sacred, Torah-based. Even you would find, and you know, in the Ancient Aliens, you know, I'm on the television program and stuff like that. Well, there are those people who are very much interested in the program. And of course, when I go to the alien conferences, you know, we'll fill up a whole room, hundreds and hundreds of people will come just to listen to little old me. I'm honored. And we talk about biblical things. That's good. But you should also know a little dirty, dark secret in the UFO circles. And that is that subtle little anti-Semitism, Jew hatred, which goes on out there. And don't think it's not there. It is. In the New Age circles, people think, oh, the New Age circles, they're so spiritual, they're so enlightened. Oh, I feel so blissful. You have a raw root of anti-Semitism, even in these New Age circles. I know I'm digressing from the women's stuff, but I have to get into it because it's important. I'm going to share with you a story that happened to me many, many moons ago, as we say, in Sedona, the capital of New Age spirituality. I was once invited to Sedona to speak. Friend's house, you know, Jewish people actually, invited over a crowd, and we were talking about Kabbalistic matters, and we were discussing the issues of reincarnation and karma. And I gave the example of how people like Nazis, can you imagine what their reincarnation and karma is going to be like? And all of a sudden, in the back of the room, all right, I heard these 2 women grabbing hands, and I noticed they were going back and forth. They lit a candle, and they were chanting, oh, in the middle of my lecture. I sat there and watched. I said, you know, excuse me, ladies, am I disturbing you? Is my lecture, which I'm here to give, a disturbance to your chanting ritual? And the 2 women says, oh, you have to understand, we're witches, and we have and embrace Christ consciousness. And you as a Jew will never be able to understand this because you don't have Christ's light within you. And we're here to dispel all of your negativity against the Nazis. So we're here to shine the light. I said, oh, very nice. Well, thank you very much for your Nazi light. That's really happened. And, you know, my host eventually got them to stop, and we finished the lecture. And I spoke to my host. I said, oh, does this go on? He says, yeah. He says, you should know, even in places like Sedona, there's a very, very strong undercurrent of anti-Semitism in the New Age movement. Now, why is this important to understand? Because when we're talking about, in quote, the war of the sexes and all the rest of this stuff, take a look at where it all comes from, okay? If we want to say to people, what does the Bible teach about women? And you're going to receive the traditional response, women are repressed. They are put down. The Bible is a patriarchy which subserviates women and treats them like chattel and 2nd or 3rd or even 4th class citizens. That makes the Bible evil, and, you know, etc. and so on, to the women's causes. Well, if you're, in quote, a party follower, you know what I mean by a party follower, right? You know, the good old Sikhail, you just accept what you're told. If you don't know what that means, go read George Orwell's 1984. I think we're getting to 1984. I think next year from 2020, we're going to be in 1984. And for those of you who are familiar with the novel and the context and concepts thereof, you might agree with me. But if you understand the animosity that these people have towards biblical traditions, and it spreads out, of course, into anything Torah-based, and who, surprisingly, or really I shouldn't say that, not surprisingly, who are the pioneer of the assault and attack against Torah, is usually secular Jews who, in the name of Judaism, attack the Torah. And some, will have a hard time with this, but it's unfortunately very, very true. The greatest enemies of the Torah have always been Jews, individual Jews, who are no longer Jewish. We could look throughout history, and unfortunately the anti-Semites, they do this all the time, and they look at some of the most notorious characters who unfortunately are born Jewish. And these people are certainly a million billion miles away from anything Torah-based, and they are a disgrace and dishonor to everything that Torah stands for. And yet they will wear some semblance of mantle of some Judaic identity, which only seeks to promote anti-Semitism, simply because in the name of Judaism, they propagate ideas, messages, teachings, beliefs, practices, which are completely contradictory to anything of the Torah. So that's the reality of the world we're in right now. And some of you might not like that, but unfortunately, I can't change the truth. And you're going to say, well, the Torah says this. And you know what? Let me tell you something about the Torah. I can quote to you a verse or a pasuk from the Torah or anything of the writings of the rabbis to justify and validate any topic in the world. I can. I could justify the Nazis. I could justify the this. I can make up I got a great imagination, thank God. All right? You make up the most concocted cause of them all, I'll find you biblical support for Darth Vader, which obviously doesn't even exist, but I'll find it for you if you want something. I'll give an example, which is rather humorous, but it's a true example. I once heard this from a local Christian religious authority here in this part of the world, in which he was preaching a message, in which he was citing from the Bible the evils of smoking cigarettes. Now, we all know that smoking is very unhealthy and you shouldn't do it, and biblically it's prohibited because it's a danger to health. But this minister was preaching way before then because he considered it to be immoral as opposed to unhealthy. Why? Because he quotes a verse from the book of Psalms, which states, the wicked man is the one with fire in his lips. You know what the fire in his lips is? Cigarettes. Evil man. And I remember I said, well, that's not exactly what the Bible meant by what you're saying. But people were going to say whatever they want to say. So that's my point here. When it comes to understanding the roles of women in the Torah, in the Bible, in Judaism in general, people are going to pick and they're going to choose and they're going to twist and they're going to turn everything to make things look as negative as they themselves are. Think of it like this. If an individual chooses to become like a black hole, then any amount of light that you want to shine in that direction is going to get sucked up into that black hole and nothing's going to get out. Now, I can't change the world, but at least I'm going to try to help you understand it. And maybe on an individual basis, we can try to do something. In our previous class, I revealed to you some of the deeper secrets of our Kabbalistic traditions about what we call the pre-Adamic civilizations. Now, Rebbe Chaim Vital, if you remember, didn't like the physical application of that. And he spoke in a deeper context, and he used Kabbalistic terms like worlds of Akodim and Nikodim and Birudim. I discuss all of this in detail in one of my ebooks called Torah Kabbalah. Please reference it there. I have a number of lessons on this in my Sefirot Within Us series as well, if you want audio classes on the subject. But in Rabbi Chaim's world, how he was able to gaze into the depth of the true essence of the collective consciousness, he recognized the archetypal origins of that which we call male and female. And it has so transcending beyond anything that we understand as men and women in human society. He recognized how and why the previous epoch collapsed and fell. The kings who reigned in the land of Edom prior to there being a king in Israel. And he referred to those, in quote, kings, it sounds male, doesn't it, as the female face, which he calls the Sag. You got to go look up the names of Yud-Kei Vav-Kei to understand Ab, Sag, Ma, Ben, to understand his metaphorical language. But what he says is that the higher female that used to be fell to the lower female, which presently is. And that is when something from outside of this world was introduced and came in, the Adamic race. The Adamic race was the male, and its role was to elevate the fallen female back to its source. We discussed this a little bit in our previous class. You got to go into the Kitvei HaAri'zal to understand all of this. And please, I warn you of the black hole mentality where everything gets sucked into darkness. If you truly come to study the Kabbalah and the Kitvei HaAri'zal and other things, don't twist this through the veil or the perversion of the modern understandings which seeks to turn everything inside out. All right, you got to stop this black hole stuff. All right, you're going to go down a black hole. Don't think you're coming out the other side, out of the light. You're going to go flush down the toilet, and you know where the toilet goes. Okay, so whatever. But get this now. When we say that the primordial world needed to be rectified by being bonded to the male, that does not mean that women, in our present societal way, are to be subservient to the men. All right? For any one of you who might think that the Rabbanit is barefoot in the kitchen walking around 3 feet behind me with her head kneeled, you don't know the Rabbanit. Never in a million years is that going to happen. No, that is not our Torah way. The Eshet Chayil is outlined as a poem, if you will, in Proverbs 31, which we will get to, outlines many of these beautiful, wondrous ideas that King Solomon expressed. But we got to get into the actual details from the biblical stories themselves. Because if we really want to understand the relationship of what we call the supernal male and female, the Ma and the Ben, the supernal world of the rectification, what it all means, well, then you got to go into the Torah. Now, remember what I said right from the beginning. When we come to understand the Torah, yes, I am using a language terminologies from 16th century. And we're applying that language to teachings from, 3,500 years ago? So long, long time before that. But being that we're dealing with the psychological, then we're dealing with the collective realities. And that is what makes it universally true. So understand, when the Torah was given to us, in the days and the ways and the means, we do recognize that it's not like what people have ever thought it was. Even Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the legend, of course, in the Zohar, he says, you know what? If you come to the Torah today, and you look at the Torah, and you think that all there is to the Torah is just the simple stories, once upon a time mentality that we have today, the Zohar says, in the name of Rabbi Shimon, we could write a better one today. And if you understand the Torah is only what we call pshat, and That's correct. I mean, the Torah is the bastion of universal truths, the cosmic collective consciousness understanding of the universe. So where do I see that? Well, hafuch ba. You got to open it up. And this is why I always tell people, if you're only understanding or reading the Bible in English, you're going to miss everything. So let's go back, way back. Let's look at some of the original stories of the role of the woman and try to understand them in a very much deeper way. Now, obviously, we got to start with the first reference to the first woman, Chava, good old Mother Eve. We all know the story, what happened there, right? She had that fling in the Garden of Eden kind of stuff. And okay, first of all, is the story in Genesis literal? Was there actually a physical man whose name was Adam with a physical woman named Eve? According to the pshat of the story, we would say yes. However, according to our understanding, whether it be Kabbalistic or Midrashic, it goes on much deeper than that. I would suspect that the original rendition of the story, Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, in the original historical date, was meant to be understood midrashically and not kipshuto, as we say. That is how I judge the Torah. Why? Because I look back to the most earliest of Torah understandings from writings that we have from the days of the Second Temple. That's how they understood it then. So, why all of a sudden we change things now? However, with that being said, what exactly happened in the Garden of Eden? Where was it? Etc. and so on. Well, we get in the whole understanding the Garden of Eden is an actual place in inner earth, and Adam and Eve actually were there. But Rabbi Chaim Vital, of course, from the Shad Psukim this comes from, and you'll find that I cover this in great detail in my lessons on the 8 gates. I have about, I think, 40 or more classes from all the different 8 gates of all of the Kitvei HaAri'zal. It's one of our biggest courses. If you're interested, go to our course page, you'll check it out. But he states there, an understanding, remember that MAH and BEN kind of Kabbalistic, mystical stuff, that Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, it's not so much an identity of an actual man and a woman. Remember the whole story, Eve taken from the what you call it, the rib. Okay, this is all loke pshutos, we say. It's not literal, all right? It's meant in many different deeper ways. And this is what Rabbi Chaim explains to us. He explains how the creation of Adam was actually the higher Adamic man, who today we call Metatron. And Eve was actually the form of physical man, Adam, which was materialized here in the physical plane. So Adam and Eve, as opposed to being an actual physical flesh and blood man and woman, according to the Kabbalah and some elements of Midrash, is actually understood as the physical and spiritual sides of the collective Adamic race. That's what it says. Shar Psukim Kitvei HaAri'zal doesn't mean that the literal understanding of Genesis is to be abrogated. God forbid we don't do that. But recognize and understand elu ve'elu, as we say. Different stroke, different understandings, different interpretations. Now, let's go into the Garden of Eden. In Agada Davida. Oh, I'm sorry. In the Garden of Eden. Yes, I'm dating myself, and I couldn't resist. I still like In Agada Davida. I still listen to it, and I don't care what you think about that. I still listen to Steppenwolf, Born to Be Wild, A Magic Carpet Ride. I still listen to Deep Purple, Highway Star, and I don't care. Right? I'm a good old 50s, 60s greaser, and Rebbe will tell you, I still got my leather jacket, I still got my Harley, and even with Torah, got it all, Baruch Hashem. But anyway, in the Garden of Eden, or in Agada Davida, depending on your point of view, what happened there? Well, Not going to get into the Kabbalistic details. If you want that, go into the Shara Psukim classes and the Kitvei HaAri'zal series. But we all know the story, all right? There was a baseball game. Baseball game in the Garden of Eden? You didn't know? But of course there was a baseball game. And there was a clear winner and a clear loser. I don't know, Rabbi, what are you talking about? Well, what was the score? You don't know? Eve 8. Adam, all right, 2, but the devil won. It's an old joke. Okay, getting serious. You know the story. God puts Adam and Eve. They're in the Garden of Eden, all right? God speaks to Adam. He doesn't speak to Eve. Just the thought popped into my mind, right? Some of y'all old girlfriend out there, good old Lilith. Well, let's mention her in just a minute. We all know the story, all right? Adam and Eve, they're in the Garden of Eden. God says to Adam, don't eat of the tree of knowledge, good and evil. He tells Eve, don't eat, don't touch. Along comes this snake, and he's chatting with Eve. He says, hey, take a bite. She takes a bite, gives it to Adam, the fall. Mazel tov. I don't know what I should say, mazel tov, whatever. Okay, let's get a little details here. First of all, remember we talked about that Lilith? We just brought her up. Good old Lil. Now, Lilith, Adam's, in quote, first wife. You gotta understand that this is not literal. Adam was not a divorcee. Lilith was not an actual gal who was, Adam's first wife and then, said to Adam, I'm not going to be submissive to you, blank, blank to you, and went off and married, Satan, Samakel, and together they're wild and parties and they go and they're dancing and all this stuff. Sorry, you're believing too many fairy tales if that's what you really believe. Yes, I know Midrash. I know Kabbalistic teachings about Samakel and Lil and all the rest because they are archetypes, psychological impressions. Lil has been projected and personified as the lowest level of female expression, wherein which the female is expressed or honored exclusively for her physical body and nothing else. Essentially, Lilith represents women being nothing more than a whore. Sorry, but I had to say it. That was the spirit of Lilith. In ancient biblical times, women were viewed as fertility symbols. You've heard, and we've covered this in the weekly Torah portions, that you're not supposed to have what's called an Asherah tree by any altar of God. Why? Because the Asherah tree, you got to understand what the Asherah tree was, right? It wasn't like a tree and you bow down, worship, oh, we worship nature, thank you, nature. No. In the olden days, check this out. They had, and this is what the Bible called a Kedeshah, a holy prostitute. All right, you even see this whole thing with Judah and Tamar, wherein which the woman was considered the symbol of fertility. So therefore, if you as a man wanted to have a blessing of fertility, having children, finances, etc., you would go and make an offering of your seed. So there was a tree. It was symbolic of the fertility rites, and the holy prostitutes were there. And you would go there and you'd have sex with the prostitute as offering your seed to, in quote, Mother Earth and the like. Well, that was considered the idolatry of the Asherah, the Kedeshah, wherein which the woman, her value, her only value, was that of a sex object. Don't think that's gone away. You have prostitution cults to this very day operating in India. And look at the way modern society presents and projects and tells a woman to get ahead. Use your body, get ahead by any which ways. There are big politicians in the world today who have followed that exact thing and have used their bodies as weapons to get where they are today. And, we don't mention names, but go look in the current events out there and you'll know who that is. But anyway, this is the degradation of a woman and what we call the spirit of Lilith. In the day before the Adamic race emanated here on earth, the older civilizations that fell into that mentality, in which the female, which fell from the matriarchal heights, was blamed for the fall, and therefore degraded and looked at only in that form. And that is when women were degraded and pushed down. That's why the Adamic soul, came to raise that up. So what the Torah comes to represent is the absolute opposite of that Lilith-style degradation. So that's why Lilith was referred to as symbolically as Adam's first wife. No, she wasn't really a wife. This is all metaphorical discussion of when the spiritual souls came down, they had to deal with what was there. Adam is called the mitaken, the rectifier. He had to deal with what was already broken. And think of it like this. If, God forbid, we had a nuclear war today, let's say between the big players, America, Russia, or China, and launched missiles will kill billions of people. Well, how do you think the survivors would view Americans, Russians, and Chinese? Oh, you guys destroyed the world. I'm going to kill you. Well, that's how they looked at, with the fall of the pre-Adamic civilizations, towards the matriarchy. They said, you women are responsible for this. We're going to get you. And that is what needed to rectify. And that state in which women were pushed down in the olden days, that was what we call the spirit of Lilith. And that is the remnant of it, which reflects to this very day of Lilith being a, unquote, she-demon, married to the Samakel, and all the rest of this. That's the negativity that came out, which needs to be comprehensively and completely dispelled. So the identification and association of the female, of course she's supposed to be beautiful and all the rest of that stuff, but think about this, okay? When a woman today who has very powerful sexual energy, she's going to draw attention to herself. And if she dresses in a way to draw attention to her physical body, say, for example, showing off her cleavage, and then she wants to give a lecture on advanced nuclear physics at Oxford, at Harvard, or she's the judge in the court, or the lawyer in the courtroom, or the doctor in the hospital, and yet she is dressed in such a way that draws attention to her physically. What do you think the natural response, not only of men, but of women, is going to be? Needless to say, your appearance is how people are going to initially respond to you. This is common sense. This doesn't have to be Kabbalah. And if you present yourself in a certain way, people are going to respond to you in a certain way. I know you must agree. Think about this. Here we are in this lecture. I'm a rabbi, dressed as a normal rabbi, white shirt, black kippah. How would you relate to me if I was here in my black leather jacket and I had like tattoos and earrings and body piercings, etc., and so on? Your reaction would be very different because you would be responding to the appearance. We all do. Some say, well, it's being very judgmental. Let me tell you something. We're all judgmental. Every day that you go to the store and you choose to buy Coke over Pepsi, sorry, that's a judgment. Every time you go to buy a car and you choose the Ford over the Chevy, everything's a judgment. Don't be so silly and don't lie to yourself. Yes, we have those preferences. So therefore, this is why we have the laws of modesty in our Holy Torah. Why? Because the emphasis is that we want women to be respected. Not that they should, God forbid, ever be ugly, right? But that they should be honored and respected and attention drawn to them because of who and what they are, and not just for a provocative appearance. And I know many women will say, I'll dress any way I want. I'll express myself any way I want. Go right ahead. We live in a free society. Go whatever you want to go, run around naked. But just remember, people are going to respond to you based upon how you behave, how you appear, and what you do. Oh, I don't like the way they do it. Well, fine. You don't have to like anything. But you're not going to change human nature, psychic energy, and the reality of the world. So you can, sing your Helen Reddy song all you want. I am woman, hear me roar. Roar all you want. Growl. What do I care? You're not going to change the way people are going to act or think or feel. You want to be taken seriously? Got to act seriously. Got to act respectful. Now, I know I'm digressing. Fine. We'll get to Eve in just a minute. You look at major women in power who we've had for a long time. All right? Powerful women. I don't care if you agree or disagree with their politics. People like Angela Merkel in modern day Germany. Margaret Thatcher in England. How about Golda Meir in Israel? If you're not familiar with these women, the power that they had pretty much controlled part of the world, right? You don't see them being provocative and trying to promote Hillary Clinton even, all right? They don't present themselves as objects of sexuality. They want to be taken seriously and respected as the human beings who they are and solicit and get the respect that they deserve. So, whether we're dealing with Golda Meir or Margaret Thatcher, Angela Merkel, Hillary Clinton, or any of these other powerful women, they are powerful human beings, period. And that is what we need to focus on. Back now to the Garden of Eden. Eve, what's her story? Well, you know what happened in the Bible. But the Midrash in the Zohar asks a very curious question, and this is very profound. Why? Why did the serpent approach Eve and not Adam? The serpent was Adam's trusted right-hand man. Now remember, according to our understanding, the Bible says that the serpent spoke. Midrash teaches us that the serpent not only spoke, but stood erect, had arms, legs, and it was essentially a reptilian humanoid. We've heard of that one before. And yes, it was. It very well might have been one of the, old reptilian races that was taken and gone astray. Because the word nachash used, snake, actually is related to the word menachesh, which means an enchanter. It's one of the older races. It was Adam's right-hand trusted person. And that's why it was in the Garden of Eden. And that's why it could easily enter into conversation with Adam and Eve in the story. So, the Midrash said, by the way, all of this is outlined in my book, Sefirot Among Us. If you want, you could read this in greater detail there. So, how come this trusted reptilian humanoid, who Adam knew forever, right? Why did he approach Eve and not Adam? Now, you go back into the secrets of the pre-Adamic civilizations. We wrote about this. I teach this in the disclosure essays. They did not like the usurper coming from outside our dimension to try to elevate them. They wanted to do it themselves. Therefore, they wanted to sabotage the whole plan. How do you do that? Well, they were going to get the Adamic souls entrapped and ensnared here in this physical reality so that they would lose contact with their other dimensional source, the Metatron, and therefore become as ensnared, as entrapped as the older races, and giving the older races the opportunity and chance to fix things first. And that's pretty much what the whole story was about. So again, back to the question. How come it approached Eve and not Adam? The answer is very profound. Think of this. Who was the stronger of the two? Adam or Eve? Especially if you want to look at the Adamic as being the spiritual higher and Eve being the physical lower. Which was the stronger? Well, obviously Eve fell, so she was the weaker. Wrong. Dead wrong. You see, Eve, Hava, was the stronger of the two. She was the Malchut. She was the Gevura. And the Menachesh enchanter knew that if he was going to entrap the soul, symbolic of eating of the tree of knowledge, good and evil, he couldn't deal with the higher, the spiritual. He had to conquer the stronger. And if the stronger would fall, then the weaker would fall along. Because we all know what happened, right? Eve ate and gave to Adam, and he ate. Now, think about like this, because this is the Chidush, this is the revelation. If the serpent was able to have deceived Adam into eating, which he could have, yes, he could, it probably would have been a lot easier than Eve. Adam would have eaten. And just like Eve gave Adam to eat, Adam would have tried to get Eve to eat. And guess what? Eve wouldn't have done it. If Adam tried to get Eve to eat of the forbidden fruit, she would not have done it. Adam would have fallen and not Eve. Therefore, the Nachash knew that it was imperative to get Eve to fall, because Adam would have been the weaker, and he would listen to his wife. The wife would not listen to the husband, but the husband would listen to the wife. Why? Because remember the role and place of the wife. She comes from the rib, the heart. She is the closest to the Tiferet. That's what Malchut is. It's the Beit Kibul. It's the receptacle of all. So the great and profound revelation and insight was the power of the female. Now remember, the sociological formation today of a woman being subservient to a man isn't really sociological, but there's something there. And if you look, it says in the Torah that when Eve fell in this respect, it said your desire will be towards your husband. Malchut would always have to bond with Tiferet, the Ma with the Ben, and subservient. And that is how a lot of modern expressions, especially in the Torah, came about. But we're also taught, and I discussed this last week, once we elevate into, in quote, the level of tikkun, rectification, called the Messianic era, where the lower female is going to revert to the higher female, that's not going to be the case. And if you look at what's happening in our society today, in quote, women's liberation and all the rest of this stuff, no, that's not what's happening. It's almost the reverse of what's happening. But that's a sign of the time. Because we always know that the klippah comes before the light. They're always darkest before the dawn. You'll always see the artificial for the actual. So, for example, you have the Armilos, who brings the one world government, what the Christians call the Antichrist, before the coming of Mashiach. Why? You have the artificial before the actual, the duplicate before the original. So what you see happening today, shifting over into the realm of Tumah, is the sign of the times that the opposite swing back to Kedusha is on its way. And that is what we learn. And that is how we understand. And that is why we're here to teach. Now, let's move on. Adam, Eve, got it. Now let's move forward into biblical history. Okay? One of the greatest stories, of course, is Abraham and Sarah. Now, Abraham and Sarah, we know the story. Okay? Who is the stronger of the two? Who is a greater prophet, closer to God? The Gemara says very clearly it was Sarah. Now, the very curious story. I love this. You know, when God is giving a prophecy, Abraham is in a meditative state. Okay, he's in a meditative state, says he's in the tent. Right? And he's there meditating, and God is saying to him, you are going to have a son. And Sarah's consciousness is on such a high level that she could penetrate into Abraham's meditative state, almost as like a hovering consciousness, observing his prophecy with God. And when God speaks to Abraham in prophetic vision and says, you're going to have a child with Sarah. Sarah, whose consciousness is there, it says, the Bible says she laughed, meaning her previous unexperienced presence was made aware. Abraham was that? Is that Sarah? What's going on? And Abraham says to God, what did Sarah say? And God says, oh, she laughed because, it says Sarah was saying, how can I have a child when Abraham is such an old man? Implication, he probably needed Viagra. Maybe they had Viagra back then, I don't know. But anyway, but then God said to Abraham, no, Sarah laughed because she says, how could I have a child when I, Sarah, am so old? The Gemara says something very profound. God lied. Yeah, God lied to Abraham. The Gemara learns so important is the power of shalom bayit, peace. That if you ever have to tell a little white lie for the sake of peace, you do it. I think that's, I think it's a great idea. Some people say, no, you always have to tell the truth. Well, no, you don't. Shalom is the most important thing in the world. Okay? Guys, all right? I think every man should know this. And if he doesn't, ladies, please take a 2x4, a hammer or something, and hit him in the head. Make sure he gets this message. Okay? If your woman comes out with a new dress or a new garment or something, she says, does this make me, you compliment her, right? You don't say, well, let me tell you the truth, dear. Yeah, it makes you look fat. You say that, you're going to get a fat lip. You say, what about shalom? What about truth? You know what? Eshet Hayel. For all the women have to put up with men, we put up with women. You always give compliments of shalom, right? You always be positive in outlook. That's the way. Abraham and Sarah. You remember the story. Abraham twice, once with Egypt, once elsewhere. He says to Sarah, we're going someplace. You're really a hot-looking woman. Now, remember something. Sarah was probably dressed in some kind of a burqa. She wasn't walking around in, like these little Ellie Mae shorts with a little tank top like women do today. How did people know what she looked like? But she was such a class act. How's that? That boy, oh boy, you interacted with Sarah. And how would they even know? I thought that in the Torah tradition, the woman is like locked up in the closet. How would anybody even know that she was beautiful? She's locked up in the closet. No, she wasn't locked up in a closet. She was interactive. She was the head of the household. She dealt with hundreds and hundreds of people on a daily basis. And of course, she was covered top to bottom. No one was looking at her figure or her measurements or anything of the kind. But they saw that she was a profoundly remarkable, beautiful woman. To which Abraham said, you know something? You're a hot commodity. They will kill me to gain access to you if they knew you were my wife. So tell everybody my sister. Okay? Now, Sarah, you don't hear any objections to her. Maybe she's taken to the house of Pharaoh. No objections. Why? Sarah could handle herself. Oh, Sarah could handle herself very well. The Midrash states, even in the Torah states, right? When Sarah was taken, anybody who tried to mess with her, Sarah turned into like a Darth Vader. She knew very well how to deal with things. And it was. And Sarah was well protected. But she still knew her place. What was that place? Place is in concealment because it's from, in quote, behind the throne that you rule, behind the scenes that you act. That is the way of the female, supernal and below. Right? Remember, the Ein Sof in the beginning, the original Tzimtzum, it's female, but it's concealed. The whole realm called concealment is called female. The revealed world is called the male, which is higher, obviously, the concealed. So that's why the female always operates from behind the scenes. That's the secret. Now, you know the story. Abraham is told by Sarah, I need a kid. It's the way it is. Go take Hagar. There was no sexual jealousy in those days. It was a very different world. I can't say that there was no sexual jealousy internally, psychologically within Sarah. Personally, I can't believe how she would not be jealous in that respect. But she knew that the coupling between her, which is between Abraham and Hagar, it wasn't like a boyfriend-girlfriend. It wasn't like he was hitting on her, was having an affair on his wife. If that would have been a big problem. It was probably a one-time deal, and that was it. And that was tolerable in that society, not today. Emphasis. Child is born. That's Abraham's son. That's Sarah's, if you will, like stepson. And then, of course, she has Isaac. She sees Ishmael messing around with Isaac in a way, and out comes, Dragon Mother herself. They speak today of the Dragon Mothers. It's a very good role model in all due respect, all right? Because that's exactly how Sarah was with Yitzhak. All right? She took care of her baby. And it's the only time in the Torah she's really speaking up. And she says, Garashet Amahazot, get rid of that woman. All right? Abraham could have said, hey, she's not my woman, she's your woman. Right? The only reason why this child is born is because you said so. But this is Abraham's son. And for a wife to say, get rid of the son? Think about it like this. Many of us have second marriages and the like. We have stepchildren and the like. And can you imagine if the new spouse, man or woman, says to the old, the spouse, your children from your first marriage, get them out of the house. I don't want them here. You know something, men and women? If your spouse were ever to say that, get rid of the spouse. You don't get rid of your children. No, that is fundamentally wrong. Those children rely upon you. You are their flesh and blood, their life and soul. You hold on and cling to them. And any new spouse is to embrace them as family. Many people today do. And those who don't, I'm going to throw them out. But with that being said, that's exactly what Sarah was saying to Abraham. How dare she say that? But, normally speaking, Abraham would have absolutely and adamantly told Sarah, no, not a chance. How dare you even say that? That would have been the normal thing to say. But God, God, you remember God in heaven intervenes and says to Abraham, who would not have known this, listen to what Sarah is saying. Because it's the higher level that she's at. She sees what you don't. She understands what you don't. Do it. And Abraham didn't. Story's history. Let's move on to the next story. We only have a few minutes left. For more stories, you go again. Sefirot Within Us, my ebook. It's on our ebook page. But let's go and look now at a very profound story. The story of Isaac and Rebekah with the blessings of Jacob. You know the story. Isaac loves Esau. Rivka loves Jacob. Jacob is messing around with his brother left and right. And it comes now, Isaac is old, and he says to his son, his firstborn son, Esau, go out, get me food. I want to give you the family patriarchal blessing. Great. Now, Rivka knows Esau's not worthy of that. She should have taken Esau aside. She should have taken Isaac, her husband, aside, wagging the finger in his face. What's wrong with you, you stupid old man? How dare you pick him? Blah, 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 blah. And shut him down and essentially yell and scream at him like women unfortunately do today. None of that occurred. She acted from that realm of concealment. She never confronts Isaac. She never yells at him. She never opposes him. She doesn't scream at him for being stupid and quote, as blind spiritually as he was physically. She honors him. She respects him. Does something really weird. You know the story. Dresses up Jacob, sends Jacob in, and Jacob gets the blessing. You all know the story. Esau is angry as the dickens. He wants to kill his brother. Did anybody ever stop and question what Esau thought of his own mother? Mama was behind it. I'm sure everybody found out. What did Isaac have to say to his wife for deceiving him? Go look that up in the old Bible. What did Isaac say to Rebekah? How dare you deceive me, you deceptive woman? Look at the strife you've caused in our family, blah, blah, blah. Not a word. Silence. Whether or not Isaac agreed or not, we don't even know. But we know that the Torah representing the position of heaven, God, certainly takes Rebekah's point of view. Isaac is silent because he deep down understood that the woman acting from the realm and domain of concealment did what was necessary. Apparently Esau recognized it too. Even though he hated his brother, not a word is mentioned against Mama. Mommy is holy. Mommy is sacred. And sons are raised to respect and revere and honor their mothers. Some will say, well, that will make the boy to be a mama's boy. Isaac certainly wasn't, quote, mama's boy. He couldn't even get married until his mom passed away. But you know something? A man who has that proper relationship with his mother, who learns how to properly respect and honor his mother, will know and understand what it means to properly honor and respect his wife. She's not a surrogate mother, but deep down inside he knows and understands the respect due to women. And that is the true message of the Bible. We can go on and story after story, and again, in my book, Sefirot Within Us, eBook, it's available online, I go into all these details. They're all expressing thousands of years before Rabbi Chaim Vital put it into words, the universal cosmic reality of the Sephirotic interactions of true psychic energy. That is what the teachings of our Torah relate. And that is what the halachot, the laws of our Torah, properly express. If people will make the effort to study them and discover their true energetic origins, as opposed to being swayed like by the serpent in Eden, by a deceptive lie of all those today who want to malign the Torah, malign Judaism, malign halakha, and make everything as negative as they are themselves. So, hafuchba, turn the nega plague of the dark into the oneg of pleasure of light. See the true wisdom of our Torah. Learn the true power of what it is to be an Eshet Chayil. Because that is the future and the coming of Mashiach. We're waiting for it. And as sages have always said, the redemption is going to be built, probably brought about by the women, just like it was in Egypt. So ladies, your tikkun is paramount. He's waiting for you. God bless. Alrighty, guys, let's conclude on that note. And Be'ezrat Hashem, we'll see you all in our next class. Holy Name courses coming up, little lesson shorts. Check out everything else we have at our KosherTorah school, the courses we have, and learn and experience. Ariel Tzadok here, KosherTorah school. See you all next time.